Hi,
Oh,
how's it going, man?
it's going great. How are you doing?
Great. I've even got my guitar here, so I can play some tunes as well.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Just ask me
So,
questions, and I'll just see if I can come up with anything interesting.
so we're sitting here with Jont, coming live from Halifax. How are
I'm
you doing
doing
today,
great.
Jont?
Yeah, life has never been better.
Let's hear a little bit about your story as an artist, as a poet, as a composer, a singer, all of that. How did you get started on this road?
I think that started probably the first time I really knew that I was what I was going to do with my life was pretty early, probably around when you're sort of emotionally you mature enough to sort of feel that sort of slightly grown up emotions, maybe sort of 13, 14, just when your emotions start coming through. And I kind of started writing poems, and it just seemed I had some class at school, the creative writing class. And so you just feel I did a poem, and everybody was like, "Oh, that's good," and everybody liked it. Everybody's like, "Oh, Jont's a good poet," and so you sort of get confidence from people liking your stuff. And I carried on being really into poetry throughout my teens. And then basically around having been fairly obsessed with it, including this tour across America, interviewing all the living American poets who would see me for an hour, including having dinner with Ginsberg. I, around about 22, just having finished university, I had been playing guitar more and more, and I'd been writing songs more and more, and I found it, and the poetry stuff I was doing was very, very particular. There were these two mentors I had, these two 60-year-old poets, one in America, one in England, and they were about the only people who read my stuff, and it was just this tiny minimalist aesthetic, and I probably was okay at it, but it was quite frustrating because, I found it much more enjoyable to be playing songs to 20 people in a room with my guitar, and you had sort of 3, 4 minutes to get something across. There was some sort of reality in that, and I ended up changing over to that, and I like performing as well, so it was quite a natural thing just to eventually get my first band together when I was about 22. So I started music quite late, really. I mean, it started off with poetry, and then got my first band together, and then it took quite a while until I could actually learn how to sing, really, and and became any good at what I was doing. So for me, it's been a long path of apprenticeship and learning my craft until probably the first really decent record I made was like 2008, Supernatural. So but by the time I did that, I was 35. So yeah, so it was about 13 years of more sort of just learning my craft, making a few albums, trying to grow as an artist. And then I think the last 4 years has been a bit more functional and a bit more like producing albums, making stuff that I feel is, I can look back on and go like, oh yeah, there's some good stuff there. So.
And you talk about Supernatural being where you come off, but my favorite album of yours is
wow.
28. Yeah, you've got the songs "A Zimmer Frame" for Mr. Zimmerman, and a book that never touches the ground. Those are probably my top two favorite Jont songs.
When people love 28. Yes, a lot of people really like that record, and I just haven't listened to it much really. I guess you just sort of leave stuff in. It seems there's lots of ways in which the way that was recorded, and I don't know. The artist isn't necessarily the best judge, but I just sort of look back on it and think, oh wow, that's so obviously my first time recording, and the production of it and stuff wasn't as strong as I feel things got to by Supernatural. But yeah, there's a bunch of other stuff, so it's very nice that you like that and the songs there.
So you used to also do you did a thing where you were traveling around. It sounded like you were traveling around Australia and Britain and America doing a tour called Unlit. What was that like?
Well, there's two separate things really. What happened? I started doing Unlit in 1997 in a venue in London called the 12 Bar Club, and what I wanted to do, I just split up from my second band, which were called Funny Bone, and they were a pretty dreadful mixture of acid jazz and folk, because the keyboardist and guitarist and the drummer were really into acid jazz and were quite muso-y, and I was just writing my songs, and for some reason we thought we should get a band together, and the result was Funny Bone, which collapsed fairly soon, fairly quickly, which was a good thing. And after that, I thought, well, I quite want to organize a monthly regular residency somewhere and just get a bit of a vibe going. So I created this underground event called Unlit, and that went for 5 years at the 12 Bar Club every month, and it was a really cool event. And then I moved to America, and I had a flat in LA where I was being managed by Tom Petty's manager, and he was paying for me to live, and I was sort of really pursuing this sort of rock and roll dream. And I had a flat of my own, an apartment of my own, where I could, I was thinking, what would I like to do with my apartment? I was like, what I'd really like to do is have it open and free to anyone every Friday night and do a gig there that's sort of a mixture of a gig and a party. I play a bit. I get 2 or 3 different people to play a bit. We have a bit of a party afterwards. And I invite all the people in my apartment block. I invite all the people in LA who know my music. And so we did it. We did it for about six weeks in a row, 6 Fridays in a row. We packed it out. Obviously, there was only about 40 people could fit in. They take their shoes off. Everybody sit around. I would compare it and play a little bit. And the different people I'd met that week would come and play. And Unlit was sort of born there in 2004, I think. Then I moved back to England to put out one long song, and I started doing it in people's houses in England, having done it. And I was doing it in people's houses in LA as well, because I couldn't carry on doing it in my flat because my neighbor started getting a bit annoyed that I was doing this thing every Friday night. So organically, it became this nomadic event that would go on in different people's houses around LA, and then different people's houses around London. And then when was it? 2006, MySpace had just been invented. YouTube had just been invented. I went on a road trip across the States. One of my MySpace friends who had heard my music, I think on Wedding Crashers, said, why don't you do some unlits in America? We're always hearing about your unlits. We want to come. So I was like, okay, well, I'll do some unlits in people's houses across the States. And so I wrote to all my MySpace friends. 25 of them said, yes, you can do an unlit in our house. And I went across the States for 2 months in a van with my friend Dave DeParis, who was the cameraman. And we did 25, and we basically did unlits in the houses of MySpace friends who I'd never met before, and made little films, which you can see on my website. And we called it The State We're In. Then that almost got made into a TV show. And basically from then on, from 2006 on till about 2008, 2009, I did a lot of unlits, basically. I went back to the UK. I did a whole 2 tours across the country in the UK. A big mobile phone company got involved and sponsored it, and we went across in a sort of big budget caravan thing with like editing. All looked like a sort of little TV show, the little episodes that went up. All this stuff you can see at jontnet.com. All the movies are still up in the unlit section. So that was kind of this beautiful thing. It was a celebration of generosity and openness. People would put it on in their homes. And the idea is that it wouldn't be just for their friends. They were open to the fact that if they created this gift for strangers and friends alike that was open and free to anyone, only good things would happen. And so they were open to the fact that anyone might come. And if they weren't open to that, I wouldn't put an unlit on there. It was only an unlit if they were happy for anybody to come to it, and that it was totally free. And it would be this mixture of 3 or 4 different artists playing very short sets and then a bit of a party. So that it was just a formula that seemed to be a very nice vibe. And so lots of synchronicities would happen, and people would have a really good time, and it would be an intimate and secure sort of place to perform. And so some people, and it would be a forum whereby you might see a 10-year-old do a song for the first time in public next to a 50-year-old who was really well known and had big hits. But they would all be kind of equal because they were just in this forum where there was 40 people listening to them do 1 or 2 songs. And it would be a lot about the whole room, the invisible conversation between the listener and the performer. And so that unlit was a big part of my life, and still is really. I mean, I still do unlit sometimes, but my journey kind of moved on at the end of 2010. I just made Whole Again, and I kind of wanted to do something more than just be in London and try to get on the radio and try to make a success of my record. I felt that wasn't really that wasn't the most courageous or brave or industrious or focused way I could try to fulfill my potential as an artist, fulfill my sort of creative potential to reach others. So I decided to be a troubadour. And a troubadour the word troubadour comes from 12th century France, where there were like poet singers who used to go around different castles, and I think they probably slept with a lot of women, and they partied quite a lot, and they sang songs and had affairs with different barons' wives and things like that. So I wasn't really a troubadour in that sense, but a traveling musician essentially, and I just quite wanted to be a troubadour for real. I quite wanted just to go out in the world with my guitar and my songs, having done this sort of long 15-year apprenticeship, and just go out there with no plan. I think all my conditioning in my life had been like, you've got to have a plan, you've got to be constructive, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And I was thinking, well, actually, why don't I just trust that if I just head off with my guitar and let my songs organically lead me around the world, then that will be the purest and quickest, clearest way to get to the next stage with my music and to really contact and touch people with my music. So that was the troubadour sort of journey started then. I went to Australia. A lot of this has been chronicled a little bit in my blog as I went around. So if anybody's interested, if it sounds interesting to anyone, they can read some of the stuff on my blog. Again, at the website, you just click on the blog button. But so I went to Australia. Yeah, I had an amazing adventure there. Ended up living for 7 months in Sydney, and the real fruits of the troubadour journey for me were the fact that I started meditating, and I'd never really meditated before, and I've always been quite interested in. My path has been as a writer, so it's like been something quite spiritual about what I was doing, but it was never explicitly in any spiritual realm. And then I got introduced to meditation, and that suddenly was like, oh wow, artists are always talking about being in the present moment. People are always talking about how not living in the future, not living in the past, being in the present is the sort of key to happiness, is the key to, loads of belief systems are always talking about being in the present. And I realized I'd never even done any exercise. I don't have any daily exercise where I really try to ground myself in the present. And I found that my body and soul took very, very easily to this. It was it's basically like a plant having water after a huge amount of time and no water. I was like, oh my God. So when I first started meditating, I was like, brilliant. It's just this beautiful way of just being a little bit more centered and a little bit quietening the noises and the thoughts in one's head just a little bit each day to remind oneself of one's center and presence. And that, in turn, had a big effect on my music. I know the song Teardrops and Pennies on Hello Halifax, which is kind of the centerpiece of the album in a way, came directly from that sort of meditation epiphany. And then other dramatic stuff has happened since then. But that's a little overview of stuff. What brought me here was amazing is that I have a daughter. I discovered in January that I have an 8-year-old daughter, which is quite an amazing discovery. And in a lot of ways, I came to that from the meditation, but that's a little bit nobody will really understand what I mean. But so I found in January I have an 8-year-old daughter, and the mother was someone who we'd had a fling in New York, and for various reasons, the various precursors in her life that had led her to, she was trying to protect her child, didn't really know whether it was a good idea to involve a father who she didn't really know very well, and was kind of trying to look after our daughter. And so I didn't find out about it till quite a long way down the line. Then eventually I got in touch, and because I'd seen a photo on Facebook, and I was like, oh right, that looks really like me. Maybe I should get in touch and find out if that's my daughter. And I did, and when I did, I found out she was. I was just overjoyed, really, and very happy. And because of where I was at, on this troubadour journey, I was very much in a place where I was very easily able to see that it was just, a no-brainer for me. I was just about to move to LA, but I was like, I'm going to move to LA. I've got, I'm a singer-songwriter. I can live anywhere. My daughter's 8-10 more years while she's still at home. This is, a huge gift in my life. So I'm just going to go and move over there. So I went 2 weeks after I found out. I came and visited, and then a couple of months after that, I packed up and emigrated from London to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and that's where I am now, very happily ensconced in my new room. You see, this is my little place in my room where I do my live stream gig from here, and this is that says hot, and that says tea, and